Where did time telling come from? Let's make this journey through the history of time. This history points out various stages, from sundials to mechanical clocks to digital watches. The first stage includes measurement devices such as the sundial, hourglass, and water clock. Prehistoric man measured time with primitive methods by simple observation of the stars, changes in the seasons. Later, the more formal sundial was invented. It is generally a round disc marked with hours like a clock. It has an upright structure that casts a shadow on the disc. This is how time is measured with the sundial. The hourglasses was also used in ancient times. It was made of two rounded glass bulbs connected by a narrow neck of glass between them. When the hourglass is turned upside down, a measured amount of sand particles steam through from the top to bottom bulb of glass. Today's egg timers are modern versions of the hourglass. Another ancient time measure was the water clock of clepsydra. It was an evenly marked container with a spout in which water egg timers dripped out. As the water dripped out of the container, one could note by the water level against the markings what time it was. The second stage belongs to a very important development when mechanical clocks, which use weights or springs, began to appear. This occurred in 30s. At first, they had no faces and no hour or minute hands. Rather, they struck a bell every hour. Later, clocks with hour and then minute hands began to appear. Then, in 1656, Christian Huygens invented the pendulum clock, which used weights and a swinging pendulum. These clocks were much more accurate than previous clocks, by less than a minute a day, compared to the 15 minutes a day of earlier clocks. The bigger the pendulum, the more accurate the clock was. In 1714, the British Parliament offered a cash reward to anyone who could invent a clock accurate enough for use in navigation at sea. Thousands of sailors died because they were unable to find their exact position, and pendulum clocks would not work at sea. Then, in 1761, after 4 attempts, John Harrison finally succeeded at inventing a small clock accurate enough to use for navigation at sea. This tiny pocket watch lost only 5 seconds. The third stage consists of one of the most important events in clockmaking. In the early 80s, Elitary developed machines, patterns, and techniques that produced clock parts that were exactly alike, so they could be mass-produced from one clock to another. This drove the price of clocks way down and allowed common people to own at least one. At the dawn of the 20th century, only women wore wrist watches. However, in the First World War, soldiers wore wrist watches because taking out a pocket watch to check the time was difficult or impossible in battle. After the war was over, it was considered socially acceptable to wear wrist watches, and they became popular. Half a century later, digital watches, which tell the time very accurately, began to appear. For thousands of years, different devices have been used to measure and keep track of time. One thing for sure, that competition and scientific rivalry resulting from various discoveries strongly encourage researchers to seek new methods of measuring time more accurately in order to get to today's modern clock.